What's up guys, welcome to this review of Star Wars Padawan by Kiersten White. So, Star Wars Padawan set before the events of The Phantom Menace with a 16-year-old Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's still trying to figure out who he is, what's his place in the universe, what's his life going to be, does he even want to be a Jedi, does Qui-Gon Jinn even want to be his master? So he's coming to terms with a lot of this stuff, trying to figure out his place in the whole thing. What did I think of this book? I did not like it, I'll be honest. This was not a book that I enjoyed reading. It's a short book, which I think is good, but I also think it's a pretty uneventful, pointless, kind of throwaway little adventure for Obi-Wan Kenobi in his youth. In that, I think it's easily dividable into the first chunk of the book is him in the Jedi Temple with Qui-Gon, trying to deal with everything that's going on and establishing what this book's going to be. That stuff I think was actually really interesting. It was very reminiscent of Master and Apprentice, only it felt like it was from Obi-Wan's perspective rather than Qui-Gon's. Master and Apprentice, by the way, another book, which I actually really recommend. It was a good book. So yeah, it was Obi-Wan butting heads with Qui-Gon, not verbally speaking, they never spoke out and argued or anything, but Obi-Wan clearly disliked Qui-Gon's approach to being a Jedi, and he often thought Qui-Gon was not really wanting to be his master. So that's what the first chunk of the book's about. He then goes off on this adventure to this weird planet, and there are some cool little connections to the High Republic, some loose connections I'll admit, but they're there, and that's really cool and interesting. And then some weird stuff goes on. He tries to investigate this planet, he sees some people who are living on this planet, he tries to help them out. That's what this book is. The problem is that the whole planet and the people on this planet is about 80% of this book, maybe even more, probably 90% is more accurate. And I just was not interested in that at all. I think the planet itself is interesting, but the people on it are not. I think the people on it are bare bones and basic, they blur into each other. I couldn't tell you one from the other. It kept coming up, right, here's this character, right, I can't remember what this character looks like. I can't remember this character as male or female or non-binary or whatever else. I can't remember how this character is different from this character. There's like 5 or 6 of them and they're just names. And I don't think the book does a good job of reminding you who these are, what they look like, what they're doing and so on, with a couple of exceptions. But yeah, the characters themselves outside of Obi-Wan just aren't that interesting. And there is a villain as well. The villain appears very late into the book. I would say about 80% into the book the villain shows up. And they are pretty boring. They are very one-note, very stereotypical. They are a power-seeking bad guy. That's it. They come on this planet, they want power, they want authority. They'll do whatever it takes to get it. They'll even betray people and so on. Very typical bad guy stuff. Now, at this point, we're saying this is a younger reader book. So it's for a younger audience, it's not for me. And I think in that regard, it works really well. It is very basic, it is very simplistic to follow, it is very easy to read. The characters aren't very well developed, but they are enough to engage and you know this guy's a bad guy. Oh, this guy is an argumentative person. This person here is the main female. This one is Obi-Wan, of course, he's the hero. So for young readers, I think they are going to engage in it. I think that it does a good job of targeting that audience. But if you're not in that audience, I don't think there's a lot here. And relating to the bad guy is the themes of this book about power and responsibility. The use of the Force. Can you just use the Force? Is it right to just use the Force? Or should you be more responsible with it? Should you only use it when necessary and so on and so forth? I think those themes and messaging in this book are really well conveyed. I think this is actually one of the highlights of that there is a lot of debate about the use of power and the rights to these powers and so on, because a little spoiler is that the people on this planet exhibit powers akin to the Force. And that's what Obi-Wan's investigating. Are these people Force sensitive? Or is there something else going on? Is there something to do with the planet maybe? And yeah, so Obi-Wan's on this planet. There's a lot of arguments about whether or not he should have the right to use the Force and whether or not these people should have the rights to certain powers that they possess. And I think the book does a really good job at showcasing those arguments from both sides and really highlighting the futility of these arguments as well, because there are numerous moments in this book when Obi-Wan's just like, oh, he's had enough. He doesn't want to argue anymore. He can't win. So I really like that stuff in this book. So it's not all bad. But I will say towards the back end, things do get a little preachy with the messaging, in that it really starts to hammer it home. Again, the younger readers, will need that necessarily. Well, they might need that, in that it really hammers home the message, and it does become a bit preachy. It's not very subtle. But again, that's for the younger viewers, the younger readers. It's not a TV show. I don't know why I'm saying viewers. I will say that the book does a good job of capturing the voice of Obi-Wan. Qui-Gon Jinn isn't in it much, but it does a good job of capturing his voice as well, and his mannerisms, and really reflecting how he's portrayed in The Phantom Menace. There's some little nudge, wink, moments in there when Liam Neeson's performance in The Phantom Menace isn't the best, and arguably it's a little wooden. The book acknowledges that in certain regards, and it's kind of fun, like, again, wink, nudge kind of things, where it's trying to explain that that's actually just who he is. And yeah, I kind of like that. One of the highlights of the book is that this book shows Obi-Wan meeting Dex for the very first time. And wow, was it so disappointing. Cool that Dex is here, cool that that's happened, but it felt a bit throwaway. Why did Dex have to show up on this planet with some other individuals? I'm not going to say who, but Dex shows up, he meets Obi-Wan, and next thing you know, they're best of mates. That's the problem I've got. They somehow go from being strangers who are working together to do something because they have to being best of friends at the end of the book. And it just feels very rushed. It's like, right, there should have been a lot more going on here between these two characters for them to reach that point. And yeah, it felt like there should have been a whole separate book that just focuses on Obi-Wan meeting Dex and maybe them going on an adventure, rather than Dex showing up in the back half of this book and then them just having a couple of interactions and then becoming best friends, simply because the book says they become best friends. A bit weird. And the whole point of this book is Obi-Wan coming to terms with who he is. Does he want to be a Jedi? Is he going to commit himself to being a Jedi? He does go rogue at the end of the day. This is not a mission that he is given permission to go on. So he often, throughout this book, he's often worried about what the repercussions of his actions are. If he returns to the Jedi Temple, will he be punished? Well, without spoiling any of it, the epilogue and the way things wrapped up is very rushed, very brief, very anticlimactic, in that not a lot actually happens. Again, I'm not gonna go into spoilers and say what happens, but yeah, it felt like they were constantly building up to all these things, and I was really interested to see what's going to happen. How's this going to end? What's Qui-Gon going to say? What's the Jedi going to say? Is Yoda going to have anything to say or do about it? And all of these things that I wanted to see, all of these things that I felt the book was building up to, just didn't happen. Instead, the book wraps up with like a couple of lines of dialogue, and it's very rushed, very brief, very disappointing. And at the end of the day, the stuff at the beginning of the book, where he is in the Jedi Temple, where he is hanging out with all these other Padawans, where it turns out Obi-Wan actually has a lot of friends, and he's got this big friend group, and there are these cliques in the Jedi, just like there are in schools and high schools and so on. That's really cool, an exploration of Jedi life, which we haven't seen too much of, to be honest. Because so often Star Wars is focused on characters going on adventures. We don't get a lot of them just living their lives. And to see this first like 10% of the book of Obi-Wan just living in the Jedi Temple, hanging out with his friends, having meals, and seeing what they're up to and what he's up to, and all the things that they get up to in their spare time, that was really cool and interesting, and one of the more fascinating parts of the book. It's a shame that is just at the beginning though, and then it does go into typical Star Wars adventure territory. And that's become one of the biggest annoying elements about Star Wars, is that they're constantly just having to have these characters, these familiar characters, go on these adventures instead of exploring the world and the universe in a bit more depth. But also, because of the time period here, there's very little room for certain events to happen. So Obi-Wan here is 16 years old. In just a few years' time, it'll be the events of the Phantom Menace. That leaves very little room for a key event to happen. And that key event, mentioned in the Clone Wars, is he must meet Duchess Satine. There are little hints of it in this book, without spoiling it, but he has to establish a whole relationship with her in this very small space of time. Now in Star Wars terms, that's very possible, because these characters go on adventures every day of the week, it seems. So it's very possible that way on. But yeah, it does feel like they are really crushing down the timeline of Obi-Wan's life a bit more, and that's a bit disappointing. And that's my review of Star Wars Padawan. I'm not a huge fan of it, to be honest. I would not read this book again. I would not recommend this book. I don't think it adds a huge deal to Obi-Wan's character. I don't think it adds a huge deal to the Star Wars lore. I think it is just a, here's Obi-Wan, here's a small adventure he goes on. He just happens to be younger. He just happens to be in a different place in his life, but it's totally unnecessary. And that's very disappointing. I did not enjoy this book. I would not recommend it. But younger audiences might get something out of it. There are enjoyable moments. And if you've liked this review, subscribe to my channel, that's the most important thing, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @the_Graham Burton. Until next time though, thanks for watching.